How's it going, everybody? What's happening? Hope everybody's doing well on this day. I step outside for this sunshine to make a video, and the thought that's on my head today is souls. Do we have a soul? And this is something that I think everyone's thought about at one time or another, and many people probably think about a lot. But no matter whether you're a materialist, or spiritualist, or somewhere in between, you've got to admit that at some point in your life, we all stop and think, does consciousness survive death? And whenever this subject comes up, it becomes very controversial. It's almost as if the subject itself is, what's the word I'm looking for? Well, there are several words I guess I could use to describe it, but it's a very risky subject when you're talking in scientific circles to consider that the mind may reside outside of the physical body. Now, if you're having a scientific discussion and somebody starts talking about the soul, instantly the rest of them scoff and say, no, there's no evidence of the soul, and it's wishful thinking, and that, we're born and we die, everything that we have is created within our minds. And in the same way, get out of here, flat, in the spiritual world or the spiritual groups, if you say that perhaps your consciousness does fade away, many people will resist that just as much, saying, no, how dare you assume that we don't live or last forever. But a question that is often asked, if the soul survives death with consciousness of this world and the awareness of the life that we've held today, at what part of our lives, or what point in our lives, does our consciousness remain? In other words, do I become myself at 20, or myself at the age that I die, or 30? What particular me resides forever? As we well know that I'm a different person than I was when I was 12, and I'm sure you are too, unless you're still 12. And growing up, you start to see that you're a different person every day. You're a different person every year. And looking back on yourself, you can think you're the same you, but the things that you've learned and the things that you've done are what help you grow into your life. And we're constantly changing. So if our consciousness survives death, then we're evolving after we die as well. So our consciousness is continually evolving with the experiences that our disembodied conscious mind may have, let's just say theoretically. So you're floating around in space, but you have no body. I like to consider people the eyes of the world. That when you look into someone's eyes, you're looking into your own. Yet one of my, I think it was Nietzsche that said, if you stare into the abyss long enough, it stares back at you. And that idea is something that I understand, that I can feel and I understand. The quantum realm, if you want to call it that, the particulate realm, is a very controversial subject. It wasn't until the double slit experiment about 100 years ago when we found out that light will behave as a particle or wave, or rather the wave-particle duality, depending on whether it's observed or not. Now, photons, or these particles of light, are affected by our observation. But what's even stranger is that they set up, more recently, the same type of experiment with lasers. And they had it set up to where, in a nutshell, you could decide whether you were going to observe it or not after the laser beam had gone through the slits. And it would react as if you had made the decision beforehand, meaning that time is completely an illusion. That ideas that we have now can go back in time, if that makes sense. We can make decisions to change the history that's already happened, if that, And when you extend that quantum realm into the macro realm, we've always assumed that it can't be reconciled, that they're completely different realms. In other words, there's a big debate in science of whether or not the brain works like a quantum computer. And ones and zeros. It's a binary system, but it works by tryptophan. And apparently there's this tryptophan where there's these things called, what is it, like these corpotubules or something, and I won't try to go into the science of it because, a person could spend a year and read every single article they wanted, and they'd still come up empty-handed as to be able to prove it one way or another. This comes down to, often at a certain point, you have to just say, step back and look at the big picture of it. Because what's happened today is that everyone's a specialist. There's a neuroscientist who doesn't believe in, let's say they don't believe in life after death, but they've never looked into it at all. And then there's a spiritualist who believes that we're all just souls and energy, but they've never looked into the material realm. It's grasping both sides and looking deep into the abyss to see exactly what it means to be conscious. And every time somebody comes and says, hey, look, this baby was born without a brain, yet he still has consciousness, and someone will say, no, he still has the brain stem and the primal instincts and whatnot. There have been cases more recently where they've been doing, which is kind of creepy, doing MRIs and brain scans of people who are considered to be in a vegetative state, who can't respond in any way. And what they'll do is they put them in there and they tell them beforehand they're going to, they have them through the speaker, for example, picture yourself, one guy, they said, picture yourself playing a game of tennis. And the front of his brain, the part that's active with moving upper body, was bright. I mean, it was obvious the person was completely aware and conscious within that vegetative state. So his consciousness was still able to focus, yet his body was not able to reconcile that. And that is the creepiest thing I can imagine. A person being completely in a vegetative state, unable to move, and being totally conscious the whole time. That is a damn scary proposition. And if I ever get to that point, I'd rather just be done with it and have my body move on, or my mind move on. But we're hanging on to life so tenuously because our lives are so short. And of course we naturally want to believe that we exist after death. And so whenever a person tries to come up with any evidence that we do survive death, instantly the scientific world will attack them, assuming that they're just having pipe dreams, that they're just trying to, make themselves happier or create their delusion. And at a point you just have to step back and say, well, that's fine, I'll live in my delusion. Because there are so many stories that just blow my mind. And every time I try to take a logical approach, a physical approach to it, and say, maybe everything's just here by chance, it just doesn't work. It just doesn't make sense in my mind. Not because it's impossible, but because we can't grasp infinity. We can't grasp where the universe came from or where it's going. All we know is this little 80-year life period that we have. So the cases that blow my mind are the ones such as the man who died, and he was in the hospital, and when they revived him, and when he came back, he had claimed to have been floating above the doctors. He was describing what they were doing, and he was even able to read the side of the light, which he could only read like right up by the ceiling. And he was able to recall these things after he woke. Doctors naturally will say it's a delusion, or your deep mind creating these things. But when you're describing exactly where the doctor put your dentures, or which doctor was doing what, or maybe one that came in the room and then left before the person was even conscious, these are regular occurrences. Now, as far as past lives, the reincarnation, one of the biggest, most official study, I guess, if you will. They've documented over 2,500 cases of children claiming to have past life memories. And they're convinced that reincarnation is real, but it's not a matter of whether you die and your very consciousness inhabits another body. It could be something more like your quantum thoughts, your idea is always in the ether. They call that akasha, and that's where all the records are. So any man or woman who's discovered anything, that can be pulled out of akasha because it's already out there. The thought pattern, the thought wave is already out there. And this is speculating strongly, but it lends a little bit of understanding to why people have psychic connections to a loved one. Why somebody can wake up at 3 in the morning, just shoot up out of bed and just know somebody they love died. And this happened to a friend of mine when I was younger. She called me in the middle of the night, I know something's wrong, and the next day she found out her grandma died at that exact moment. How do you explain that? Is that a quantum connection between what they might call, non-locality, or quantum entanglement? I don't know. Nobody knows. So it's easy to brush it off and just say, oh well, it's nothing, it's just one story. But this happens over and over and over. And some of these kids who are born with memories, and there's one in particular, if you look this up, it might just blow your mind too. There's a particular kid who, when he was about 2 years old, he started waking up, having panic attacks, and acting like he was kicking and hitting. And he said, by the time he could talk, he started saying, "Little man in the plane, he wants out of the plane." When his parents could finally talk to him, this was a couple of years he was having his nightmares, when he was finally able to talk, they said, well, what happened? They said, "Little man in the plane can't escape, can't get out." And he said, "Who's the little man in the plane?" And he says, "It's me." As he grew, he began to, and was able to vocalize. They even asked him, like, what were you? He's like, "Well, I was a pilot." And it gives me chills just thinking about it. And this kid was able to tell him the name of the aircraft carrier he took off from, that he got shot down, and even his name, which was James. And they thought it was confusing because they had named him James. And turns out they looked it up, Googled it, and found this one obscure little page about a ship where only one person had been shot off of that ship. And it was a pilot who had taken off, and he was shot down by the Japanese. And his name was James. And they took the kid to the location where he was shot down, supposedly. There's a whole story about it. There's a documentary you can watch on actually Netflix that talks about it, pretty detailed as well. And just the look on the kid's face, it's so matter of fact. But what they found is that, he says, "Hey, I had a past life, now I have this life." And this is where the problem comes in with trying to define reincarnation. People will say, well, if we had a past life, why can't I remember my past lives now? That would seem very simple. And as a natural law, it would not want us to remember past lives. If you could remember 100 past lives, let's just say, assuming that that's true, what would be the point? You're not learning anything unless you're learning as an individual. And the creepiest thing that the kid said to his parents is, he said, "I knew you'd be a good mommy and daddy when I picked you." And they said, "What do you mean? How did you pick us?" And he said, "I saw you in Hawaii in a pink building." Well, the night he was conceived, they were on vacation in Hawaii in a pink motel. And that just blew their minds, It blew my mind to think of the fact that, is there a possibility that maybe we do die and our consciousness does choose parents? And then one might say, well, why would people choose bad parents? And somebody could say, well, maybe it's because we have a lesson to learn. And then it goes down to karma and all these ancient, beliefs about existence and fuck off, fly. I don't know what to think about it. And I've gone to one day I'll completely believe in everything as being just by chance, I shouldn't say I'll completely believe, but rather one day I'll be very rational about things. And then the next day I'll see something that will just resonate with me so strongly, and I feel it in my bones. And the things that resonate with me are not the negative things. They are the positive things, such as believing in the energy centers within your body. Let's talk about Kundalini for a minute. The unwinding of the serpent up the spine. This is still used in the American Medical Association, which is the caduceus, which is the staff with the snake around it. This is a symbol of that energy, that spiral energy, which people talk about. Now, the minute you bring these things up, people start thinking you're a fruitcake or you're a loony, and you just, that you're just believing all this spiritual stuff. So I have to step back for a minute and say, wait, how happy are people who are trying to rationalize everything? How happy do they appear compared to those who accept the fact that there may be something greater? It's almost become like an offense to assume that there's anything that science can't prove. And religion has a purpose. It has been around for thousands of years for a reason. It's because humans yearn for that connection to source. And you don't have to define it as God. You don't have to put a name on it. You don't have to assume that it's something that is even consciously aware of you. Because we try to anthropomorphize everything. We try to say, well, God he thinks like a human. He has, if there is a God, there's no emotions. It wouldn't be like the human life that we know. That's assuming that we are on top of everything. that our consciousness is what really matters. But we are thinking beings, and the question remains, why do we think? And why did evolution choose to make us aware of ourselves? I don't have an answer for that. I don't think anybody does. Well, folks say, well, it's just natural selection. We just evolved to be more conscious. The smarter humans survived because they were able to reason. But the question still remains of why. This is a very difficult one to get over when I discuss this with people, because I can't express it in words. When I say, why do things evolve at all? And folks say, well, they mutate and they become more complex, which of course goes against the natural, we talk about like the law of, I believe it's one of the second law of thermodynamics, or one of those that everything falls apart, basically, that everything falls into smaller pieces, and the opposite side of that is that planets, stars, trees, humans, everything is being built out of this nothingness. So the dissolution becomes the reconstitution. And this pattern, this recycling pattern, is an amazing one. You know that all the heavy metals on Earth come from an exploding stars, okay? Sometimes we don't stop to think that our star has not exploded yet. What this means is that other stars that came billions of years before our galaxy exploded, and then those particles coalesced into structures and created planets, suns. Trying to explain it away as just the way the universe is doesn't do it for people. They expect more. They want a deeper answer. And I think that we damn well deserve a deeper answer. And since we can't answer this with any current methods of testing, nor do we have any devices to measure consciousness or awareness, I think that we're slowly starting to creep into that area, to where we're going to see that our brains really are these quantum computers, meaning that they're non-local, if you will, that our thoughts may reside outside the body. How can a person die and come back, be reanimated by the doctors, and then have memories of during their death? And I'm not just talking about saying, oh, I saw a tunnel in white light, because this is something I've experimented with myself, because DMT, dimethyltryptamine, as well as certain anesthetics take you to a state where you can get very similar to that tunnel. And you wonder exactly what that state is. When you get through the tunnel, you come into a place that is more real than waking life. And anybody who's had an intense DMT experience, not just, whoa, colors, I mean, really gone deep, you know that you're in another place. And it's very real. And it's very real to you. And some people can never let go of this. Very intense trips can put you in a realm, just like a dream that you might remember for the rest of your life. Some dreams are more memorable than life experiences. And that in itself says that dreams may be just as real to our consciousness as waking life. And the more we talk about these things, the more it gets into the what realm. What do you do with this information? Well, I guess to condense it down, you take this information and you ask yourself, would I prefer to believe that consciousness can reside outside the body? Or would I prefer to believe that consciousness is just developed and then dies? Now, setting aside what we know or think we know factually, what brings you more happiness? And a retort may be from an atheist to say, well, if you're believing in something, then you're living your life for that religion or whatnot, and you're missing this life, the important part. I would agree with that. But believing in something greater doesn't mean you live your life for an afterlife. That's what I'm saying. You can live your life to its fullest, embrace everything, enjoy all the material goods, have a great time, and still believe in something after death. And what does it hurt? And the fact that it's something that we've all talked about and dreamed about for so long says there's something to it. So the question is, do you want to believe that it's just a human construct because we're scared and desperate? Or do you want to believe that there's more to it that we just can't yet understand or explain? Like I heard one doctor say, hey, we don't have a scientific, there's no way to measure these things, so they don't exist. I say, hey, it was the same way with radiation. Magnetism. What is magnetism? Can you see it? No. Create a device to measure it. That's the life we live in. We want proof in front of us, but sometimes we just can't get it. So I implore you to research a little deeper into these after, second life experiences, if you haven't, because they're very interesting. There's a lot to gain from it, at least in personal insight into life, in my opinion. So, happy human life to you.